Speaker list, after 30-some years in Extension, I've worked with a number of wonderful, excellent Extension folks, but I was a little bit taken back at who we could get for someone that Time magazine has identified at one point as one of the 100 most influential people in the country. But as any farmers would say, hey, when the sun shines, make hay. I certainly didn't want to lose the opportunity and all the work that the Winchester Academy had put together to bring this program together. So I said, there's one person I know of who's spent a number of years, if not his entire career, in this area of community food systems, and I think would serve as a great backup for Mr. Allen. And little did I know that Greg Lalas, who's one of our statewide extension specialists out of UW-Madison, not only was familiar with Growing Power and Mr. Allen, but has worked with him and his staff members closely, so we couldn't have found a better backup under these situations. So it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Greg Lalas. Greg earned his undergraduate degree in pre-law at the University of Illinois in 1989, and then his graduate degree in land resource management at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in 1994. Following that, he worked 13 years in the cooperative development area with the UW Center for Cooperatives. Then in 2005, he became the co-director of UW Extension's Agriculture Innovation Center, supporting a statewide network for agricultural entrepreneurs. In 2008, Thrive, which is an economic development organization in south central Wisconsin, contracted with Extension to enlist Greg as their director of ag initiatives, where he developed and launched a buy local campaign in supermarkets and a regional network of food business incubators in southern Wisconsin. Since 2011, he has co-managed a national research and extension project that connects agriculture and food security in American cities, in partnership with UW-Madison as well as Growing Power Incorporated of Milwaukee. He serves on the board of directors of the Urban Economic Development Center and is involved with the startup of the Institute for Urban Agriculture and Nutrition, both based in Milwaukee. So please join me in a warm Wapaka welcome for Mr. Greg Lalas. Well, thank you. Can you hear me okay? You can't hear me? How's that? I'll try putting this mic on. I'm going to hit my timer here and give myself 30 minutes. But the battery on my phone's kind of dying, so if time runs out, someone might have to tell me. And this looks like a contraption I've never seen before. I'm going to skip that. Maybe I can just take this off. So this is actually the fourth slide in my presentation, but I thought it made sense to start here. I don't know how many of you are Badger basketball fans. I'm a rather huge Badger basketball fan. It was a very good year, 2 good years in a row. Did you hear that Bo Ryan is retiring? Bo Ryan, this will be his last year, so it was kind of a sad day of news for today. But I was thinking, you know, stepping in for Will Allen is a little like a 6-foot walk-on stepping in for Frank Kaminsky or Sam Decker. So. And it's an appropriate analogy because one thing that Will and I have in common are we are both very big college basketball fans. And you may know, or you probably know, I've heard that he played college basketball and he played professional basketball. He was the first African-American player to play for the University of Miami. And I don't think I've ever seen him without his University of Miami hat, although I do know that when he was in the White House, he wore a different cap for that. In fact, I think he wore no cap at the White House.
He played professionally 1 year for the ABA. He actually showed me his card. Someone in Europe sent him his pro ball card somehow. And then he played a number of years in Europe, where his kids were raised. So I could go on and on about this guy. It's been really fascinating to work with him. I tell everyone that the grant that we got a sizable grant to work on this national research project, and I credit him for getting it. We wrote a good grant, but it was his name on the top of it that really, I think, secured it. Just 2 weeks ago, he still stayed in touch with the White House, and just 2 weeks ago he was in Italy with First Lady Michelle Obama. I'm not sure what he was doing. I haven't heard it. I haven't seen him since then, but he's a world traveler, and because of his work, he's been supported not only by this federal grant, but Walmart gave him $1 million a few years back. I know that Walgreens has been very supportive in trying to open some markets for him in Chicago. Cisco is a local food distributor that's been very supportive. He grows carrots on their land. So really, a lot of people are getting behind this man's work, and part of it is he's a very charismatic figure, and if he does come here, you'll find out what a story he has to tell, but also he's just part of a movement. And I think he's getting funding because people know that there's some issues we need to resolve nationwide, especially in our big cities, but really nationwide. And he's an innovator who's trying new things, and as a African American man, he's an amazing model for a lot of the youth and adults in our big cities. So I'm going to back up just a little bit, though. I want to acknowledge this guy. Steve Ventura is the other genius on our team. He's a very humble professor. I call him the Buddha. I could get riled. I've been managing the project, and I helped write the proposal and turn in the proposal. It was a 287-page proposal we wrote. We turned it in 5 years ago today. But he's the steady guy and the wise man who's really led this project through all the challenges that you have in a big project like this. And it was really his brainchild. The exact project itself was his brainchild. And then just to back up to the first slide, this is our logo. That's our official title, Evaluating Innovation and Promoting Success in Community and Regional Food Systems. And this is just one of the projects I've been managing the past 3 years. There's our partners down below, and we've had many other partners. This is a list, and it was Will Allen's name not only that got us the funding, but also opened the doors to some of the community organizations in minority communities around the country. When we dropped his name, they immediately, that gave us immediate credibility. So we weren't just some academics in Madison, Wisconsin. We were working with Will Allen. So both those men were really critical to this whole project. When we originally designed the project, we knew we were going to try to do, it needed to be national in scope, and we had to come up with some cities. Where were we going to go? The Midwestern cities made sense. It was close for us to get to. Some of us had ties. I had connections in Detroit, Chicago, Madison, Milwaukee. We chose Los Angeles because it seemed we needed to get out of the Midwest. We needed to see someplace quite different, and Los Angeles is very different. Boston, I had lived there for 2 years, so I literally chose Boston because I wanted to go back. And unfortunately, it was, of all the cities, it was the only one that I didn't make it back to, but other members of our team did. And Cedar Rapids might look like kind of the odd one out there, and that was really kind of a political decision. We were trying to get a University of Iowa person to join our team, and he says, well, I'll join your team if you'll work with this organization, Cedar Rapids, so we did. So that was our team, our plan. And it was a research project, but it was also an outreach project, like an extension outreach, training project, education. We promised we would involve youth. And, but the research part of it was pretty fuzzy. We were looking for I'll get to this in a minute. We were looking for another partner in Michigan after we got funded, and we needed to replace someone, and we tried to talk Mike Hamm into joining the project. He says, well, send me the proposal, I'll read it. He read it, 287 pages, and he called back and he said, I just don't see your research methodology. What is your research methodology? I can't join your project if I don't understand what you're doing. And I turned over to Steve, expecting he would have an answer to this question. And it was pretty clear he didn't. It was the fuzziest research methodology I think anyone's ever gotten $5 million to go for. But I think they saw our intention. They saw that we really, truly were going to reach out into these communities of these 7 cities. And they trusted we'd figure out as we went along. That professor in Michigan couldn't handle that. That was just too open-ended for him, so we weren't able to get him to join the team. But over the course of the next 2 years, we had to figure out how do you get into a city and how do you figure out how their food system works and what's not working and what's innovative How do you get in there? Initially, we said we were just going to parachute in for 5 days. We had a budget for 5 nights of hotels and 1 flight, and we got pretty quick feedback that that kind of research happens from universities all the time, and it's not only not very effective, but it's a lot of people take it as an insult. You know, you drop into our community for 5 days, you say you think you know what we're doing, and then you disappear, and you often don't even send us the final report. So we knew we weren't going to succeed if we had that same method. And instead we came up with something, we just invented it, and we called them community engagement projects. And what it was we said, we'll visit your city. We talked to them ahead of time via phone and email and video, and we says, we will work on anything you want. You tell us what project you want us to help with, and we will work on it. You name the project. And this was with not the entire city, but with a small organization or nonprofit or a coalition. And so that's what we did, and we worked, we came up with these projects in all these 7 cities, and often the further they were, we had to, do a lot of our work via email and phone, but it was a way for them to build trust in us and build relationships and get to know people. We brought all of them to Milwaukee at one point. So over the course of time, and I'm going to show a lot of photos of what we've kind of learned and who we met, but part of what we were doing was very academic. We were working with them and we were helping them with all kinds of projects, but back in the offices, we were thinking like academics. We were trying to understand this extremely complex food system. I don't know if you've heard that term. I've been hearing it since I moved here. In 1992, I moved here. 1991, I've been working for UW since '92 when I was in graduate school. And all my work all these years has been on food systems. And basically trying to understand what we see and use every day. We eat every day. We're tapping into a food system every day of our lives. But how does it work? And how doesn't it work? How do we improve it? And so when we first wrote the proposal, Steve wrote about 2 or 3 pages of it, described this food system. And those words at the bottom were what he used to describe it, the different components of a food system. And under each of those, land suitability, land tenure, food processing, ag systems, marketing, capital and labor, community relations. On the far end here, food and nutrition, legal environment, business models, transportation and logistics. We were going to try to cover all of this in a 5-year project for $5 million, understand all these components. And initially, all we had was those words and a couple pages of text, and we had to bring it to life and see, what were we missing and understand how could it work better. So this was Steve's first design, and along the top is what the funder wanted us to solve. Anytime the government gives out money, it's because they want something in return. So when they give money to Lockheed Martin or Halliburton, it's because they want something in return. They want them to deliver something. In our case, they were asking us to deliver some solutions, some answers to what's really some fundamental problems. Our food system works really, really well in a lot of ways, but there are pockets, certainly in communities, in cities, in rural communities, that people aren't getting healthy food. They're eating the wrong foods. It's causing enormous health care costs that the rest of us have to bear. So the federal government says, go in there, dive into these cities, figure out what's working, and bring back some solutions for us. So that what they wanted us to work on was making healthy food more available to people in large cities, more affordable, more accessible, appropriate to their world. So you can't, you have to figure out, well, what does it people want to eat? What is part of their culture? And then just more sustainable overall, so it could be sustained over many years. So we worked with this model for a while, and we showed it to a lot of folks, and it was very academic, and mostly people just, their eyes glossed over. Then we came up with a new one. So at some point, one of our project members says, I need to redesign this. And so we let her, and she came up with this new model, and it only got more complicated. And one of the things that we weren't capturing, and it was because in the meantime, this is about year 2, 2 years into the project, we've been working with the community groups for a long time at this point. I was in Milwaukee basically every week for 3 years. I've been to Milwaukee 150 times in the last 3.5 years. And so I was learning that, they care about this stuff, but really the people we were working with that work at nonprofits and work at companies and work in the school systems and work for government that were working on these issues, they had all these values that they were always talking about. Justice and health and prosperity and the things that they were values, and we tried to struggle with, well, we've got to capture these somehow, and eventually we landed on, basically I'll just back forward, this booklet came out maybe 3 years ago, and it went through a very national process of really grassroots people kind of trying to identify what are the values that we want in our food system. And these are the words and topics that they came up with, and we just decided it would be easy to, we'll just adopt this. We understood these, we could relate to these, they were straightforward. So, you know, in a future food system, and I'm not saying we don't already have a lot of this, but how could we have stronger, healthier people, more sustainable food systems, more thriving economies, more justice, stronger communities, vibrant farms. So these values, combined with this system, was what we thought we were trying to describe and understand. So we were very happy when we got to this point, and we got a nice fancy design. We called it the bike pedal. We often refer to it as the bike chain because it sort of looked like a bike chain, and that's just how we described it. And unfortunately, really a bike chain in food systems is not a very good metaphor. It didn't really communicate that much. So next, our latest version, we're saying, well, let's look at this system, this very complex system, through the lens of these values. So we could look at it through simply the lens of profit maximization and look at this food system and say, it's great. There's enough profit in the system to keep it going. But when you look at it through these different values and you look at this system, you might start thinking, well, how could we tweak and improve this? So after all that, Steve puts up this cartoon for us. So the woman says, what do you do for a living? He says, I'm working on a framework to allow construction of large-scale analytical queries on unstructured data. She says, I'm a little turned on by that. Settle down, it's just a framework. So after all that academic thinking and whatnot, you know, where were we? So this is just my statement. Today, Americans are served by a global food system that is by many measures more productive, more efficient, and safer than at any time in human history. And I really believe this. I work with a lot of people who are really very critical of our food system. I'm spacing his name. He was just in Milwaukee last month, but the Omnivore's Dilemma, Michael Pollan. Okay, I've seen him speak a few times. And he always makes me feel a little uncomfortable because I've been working with Greg Blondie and I've been working with Bob Kropp, both of them. And I worked at the Center for Cooperatives and we worked with farm supply co-ops and dairy co-ops. And I really was constantly exposed the past 20 years to mainstream agriculture, our mainstream food system. And you know, the Michael Pollans of the world they sort of annoy me a little bit. You know, I mean, if you're going to only complain about the system and not value the parts of it that are working, you know, where are we really going to, you know, where do we build from? So I really believe this statement, and I visited many, many farms across the state, 800 cow dairies, small dairies, organic dairies, vegetable farms. I worked on a vegetable farm for a year in '91. So it's a great system, and we do have a bunch of problems. I mean, there are a bunch of issues with our food system, and you can deny it, but there are a lot of people out there who don't deny it. And this is just some of them. This is just something I came up with, but I mean, you've seen all these. You read the papers, you know, if you hear this, and you may not agree with every one of them, but basically you can make a tie to all of these problems and our current food system. So, just to pick one. It's been a very hot topic in the medical field, and it was really behind a lot of what the government was asking for us to do when it funded this project. They talked about food security. That's the kind of academic or wonky term, food security, food insecurity. But a lot of times they were talking about what are we going to do about the obesity in our society. You know, you hear the numbers, and and I don't think we even really comprehend the full economic impact of those numbers. So this is part of what's been driving us. Michelle Obama, you know, in her gardens and her Let's Move program, clearly this was part of what we were looking at. And I fuzzed out his face so the poor boy doesn't, you know, end up on a PowerPoint in 20 years. But I got this off the web, and you know, we know part of it is what we're eating and a more sedentary lifestyle than really humans are meant to have. And I was driving down to Chicago one time. I made a lot of trips to Chicago, probably 10 or 12 trips to Chicago. One day I stopped at that, everyone's been there, that Oasis on the way down at, I forget the name of the town there. And I saw this, you know, this advertisement. And I'm heading down to Chicago to work with all these communities that are doing this, you know, wonderful work, trying to get healthy food to people. This is a burger that, there's no bun in this burger. The top part is a fried chicken fillet, and the bottom part is a chicken fillet, and in between it's bacon and cheese. And it's double down. I mean, if you remember that phrase, double down, it's like when your friend running for politics and you say something stupid and then they come back and you instead of like saying, oh, I'm sorry, that was real, instead you double down and you take it even further. And I really felt like that's what they were saying here. Like, we don't care. In fact, we're going to drop the price and we're going to give you, you know, the most unhealthy possible option there is, and have some fries with it and maybe a Diet Coke. So I saw this, and you know, so we live, you know, and I can't say that I would ever order that, but I had fries and a burger before I came here, so I like my food, you know. But what Will Allen is trying to do is trying to present another option, especially in those communities in big cities with vast territories of really low-income population where there's no grocery stores at all. You know, there might be a corner store, and if they have any produce at all, it's wilting, you know, and you wouldn't even want to buy it. So what Will has been doing is trying to get good, healthy food into the communities that need it. And this picture over here is in Los Angeles. We saw this in all 7 cities. You know, you see, and I'm sure it's in this, and I think I heard it. We talked a little bit before I came. I know you're doing things here. You have gardens and you have pantries and trying to get the healthy food into the pantries. So this has been, you know, Will's mission. He grew these carrots. Will never grew carrots before. You know, as he told me, it's not as common in African American culture to grow and eat carrots. You know, there's a lot of things that they do eat that maybe we don't. We white folks don't eat. But carrots was not something he had any experience growing. And then when you get to know Will, that does not stop the man. You know, it did. In fact, he put in, I think, 14 acres of carrots and had never really grown carrots before. And I went there, and it was a mess. It was a disaster that first season. And you know, he has some subsidies. It was on free land. Cisco provides him land in Jackson, and it was kind of a disaster. And we held a meeting. We brought together some experts. We brought Aaron Silva, and I brought a great carrot farmer from Two Rivers down and his wife. And we basically surrounded him with a bunch of expertise, and he really listened, and he picked up some very important things. The next year he did a much better job planting, and we had a drought. Total drought. I mean, he didn't have any irrigation, and he lost the crop entirely. So 2 years in a row, terrible crop. The third year, it was a fantastic crop, great variety. He picked a great variety. That's the harvest right there. He's a very happy man. That was really the first day he pulled them out. He's like, this might actually work. And that winter, he made what the USDA said was the largest shipment of fresh produce to public schools in USDA history. I think it wasn't that much. It was 30,000 pounds. It fed the school system in Chicago for 1 day, just 1 day. And that was a man who accepted, I think, 31 cents a pound for his carrots, and they're practically organic, which in the organic market, wholesale, you can get 75 cents, $1 a pound for organic carrots, and he took 31 cents and got these kids. And to do it, he had to work with Cisco. He had to work with Amalio's Produce to chop them and clean them, and then get them delivered. So I mean, he brought all of his corporate partners around him, and they all pulled it off. But I'm gonna have to get moving a little faster before my phone dies, and get to my pictures. Oh boy. So I'll skip over some of this real quickly. So my portion of research, each of us on the project, there's about, I swear there was maybe 50 people employed on this project over the 5 years, maybe more, most of whom I got to handpick and hire, which was really fun. But the piece I focused on was food processing, and that's really kind of my passion. How can we make our food processing system turn out more healthy food options and maybe add more value to the farmer's product? So just focusing on vegetables for a minute, the average American, typical American, eats 42% of what the USDA recommends we should eat in terms of fruit every day. And do a little bit better on vegetables. The average person eats about 59% of what they're supposed to eat for vegetables. That's just the typical American. This is just some data from Milwaukee, where I spent most of my time, and I'll just zoom in. Basically what this is saying is that even in the wealthier communities of Milwaukee, and there's some money in Milwaukee, in the wealthier zip codes of Milwaukee, only 38% of the population is eating their daily vegetables, fruit and vegetables that they're supposed to eat. That leads to better health, that leads to less cardiovascular troubles, that leads to longer life. Only 38% of the rich folks are eating their fruits and vegetables. And what I've been trying to communicate is, how could we change that? You know, how could we make it easier, more palatable for us to eat better? Certainly it's not with a double burger, without a bun type of meal. This is 5 different research papers that I tracked down to sort of figure out, well, what's not working? Why aren't we eating our fruits and vegetables? And all these studies are about low-income folks, mostly minority and low-income folks, urban and rural, down south, all over the country. And basically, I read them all. I printed them out. I actually read them all, underlined, read the whole thing. And this is what it all boiled down to. All 5 studies basically said that at least for poorer consumers, taste. Well, this just drives a lot of my colleagues mad. What do you mean they don't taste good? Are you crazy? Eat this carrot. You got to acquire the taste. You got to acquire it. So they find it hard to accept that people might not actually like some of these foods. But of course, time. Especially fresh produce, chopping, designing a meal around it. Only in America do we have a meat product, and then over here's the vegetable, and over here's the starch. We even divide it in our trays. They're just separated. But in many cultures, it's all mixed in. It's Chinese, if you think of Chinese food or whatever. So but poor person who's working 2 jobs and running their kids back and forth to daycare and whatever else, they don't have the time to make anything, and yet they also don't have the time to buy it prepared. So they're really caught in a bind. If you do buy it fresh and it spoils, you've just wasted some money. And then cost is an issue. Healthy food costs more often. Well, I'm just going to skip over some slides quickly. I looked at some examples of where maybe they were doing something around food processing that would address this. It was actually disappointing. I really didn't find anything in Los Angeles or any other city. The best I could find was some really excellent work, some of which probably involves some farmers right around up here. And Jed Calhoun, Jed, I would invite him to come up and talk about this project right here sometime. I won't talk about it though, and I've already mentioned this. But overall, I did some academic stuff and kind of compared these, and overall, I think it's one area that we have a lot of room for improvement. And I think our existing food processors could be part of the solution. But we are, as far as I'm concerned, we've barely even scratched the surface of how our food processing industry could help us have more healthy food options, eat more of our fruits and vegetables, eat better, live longer, and we got a lot of work to do. None of the examples I'm going to show you now delve into food processing at all, so that was the end of that chapter. But I do want to quickly run through and just show you a lot of photos, and hopefully it will churn out some questions. Okay, Los Angeles. I don't know if you've ever been there, but I lived in Boston for a few years, but otherwise I'm a Midwest boy. I grew up outside of Peoria, small city. So I could not help taking pictures of Hollywood, and that's Jim Morrison giant mural in Venice Beach, and trees that looked like that. And, this is a guy in Hollywood, don't know what he's doing, John Wayne. So we were sightseers for a little while. I mean, you couldn't help it if you're from from Wisconsin. But we spent most of the time really getting to know Los Angeles. We spent about 4 days there, and we were being toured around with people who lived there, worked there. This is South Central LA. I think it was in the early 90s when the city burned, South Central LA. They've actually rebranded it. They now call it South LA. They're trying to get past all that happened. But really, as far as I could tell, and as far as what they're saying, things haven't improved that much. And there's definitely a shortage of good food options in a vast swath of South LA. But the thing that California has that we don't have is, number one, avocados, but really pretty much year-round fruits and vegetables. So when we were wondering, they're doing a lot of good work here, but why there's no real urban agriculture? We don't see much. They were doing a few things here and there, but the fact is they're surrounded by produce. A shortage of produce isn't really the issue in California. It's not getting into some of those neighborhoods, and for that reason, they are doing some, there is gardening, large-scale community gardens and small-scale nonprofit gardens in Los Angeles, but really nothing on the scale that you'll see in Milwaukee, for instance. This is an example, mini farm. Well, this is very mini. This is in a school. So a lot of work we saw around the country was working with schools, and that certainly has a very high education value, but it doesn't produce a lot of food. That's Alfonso Morales, a colleague of mine at the University of Wisconsin. Another great guy. If you're ever looking for a speaker, this guy could talk for 10 hours and you wouldn't ever be bored. But there we are on the beach. But Detroit. I think we all hear a lot about Detroit. Detroit has some serious problems. I mean, Milwaukee is doing great as far compared to what Detroit is going through right now. This is the Detroit we see when you watch NFL football, and they got to show the city. But this is what's most of Detroit. Vast swaths of Detroit. Detroit is a huge city. It's really spread out, and 90% of it that I saw looks like this. The industrial buildings, the industrial corridors, but the housing. We went into houses, and we really got into the neighborhood, definitely. And there's some good things going on around food. There are a lot of people who have an optimistic outlook and are really using agriculture and food and doing some really great things. There's an art renaissance in Detroit. There's a lot of great things about Detroit, but they have a long way to go. This is kind of in between. This eastern market, in the old days, big cities had wholesale areas where fresh produce and meats and everything, the wholesale that fed the city was in the city, not in the surrounding suburbs or not in, distribution plants way out, but these were in the city, and this is actually the same one. This is one of the few cities in America where that central vegetable market still exists, and this market's been running, I think, 100 years or something, and it's fantastic. If you've ever been to the Madison Farmers Market, this is bigger. I'd say it's better. It's really amazing, and it's only about 5 minutes, 7 minutes from downtown, and 5 minutes from really the desolated parts of the city. So it's kind of a beacon, or an oasis in the middle of Detroit. Chicago, this is this is Englewood. You hear about the shootings in Chicago. This is where they happen, right here. Places like this. This is Englewood. I just looked up the data. Median household income, $19,743. Over here in the red, I just noted, I was trying to think, I couldn't remember what city this was, so I'm scanning, zooming in and trying, where did I take this? And I see Brookfield Zoo over here, and then Illinois Lottery's up there, so I go, okay, this was Chicago. So it says Brookfield Zoo. Well, I thought, well, let's look at Brookfield. Brookfield's median population is $68,000. So that's quite a disparity, and sometimes we don't, even in this project, we haven't often just said the obvious. The reason these folks have food insecurity is they're dirt poor, It takes money to buy good food and to attract grocery stores into your community. A grocery store doesn't want to be in the business of losing money. They're going to lose money in this community. They're probably going to get robbed in this community. The one grocery store I found in Woodlawn, which is right nearby, I talked to the manager, and he said that shoplifting is their #1 problem. They lose there's a razor-thin margin in the grocery industry. If you're losing 5% on shoplifting, you've kind of just, you're not going to be around long. So it's poverty, really, that's to me, the bottom line and why we have this problem in the first place. And the gardens are great, and yet they're educational, and they do provide some solution, but until we get to the bottom of it, I don't know that it's going to go away. So if you think of those two, this is the median household income. So I don't know where you fall, but Brookfield's off the chart, and Englewood is way, way, way down the bottom of the chart. So that's the problem. But then you see this. This is like the perfect image of urban agriculture. This is like the best image I could find in my whole. We took 2,000 photos as we ran around the country this past 4 years. But right there you have a big condo being put up. I think this was not far from Cabrini Green, which not so long ago, if you remember Mayor, what was her name? Jane Byrne, yeah, and Washington was after her, I think. But this is in a formerly fairly rough area. You can see the city in the background. This is not growing park. Will has a daughter in Chicago that runs their operation down there, and he's also got an operation in Madison. This is the operation that his daughter runs. This is kind of 2 stories up in an industrial building that they got for $1. You can just barely see the water back there. That's a spur of the Chicago River. And she's doing really amazing things. Cedar Rapids, well, that was that political choice we made. It ended up being a really fascinating place to visit. You remember the floods? We had floods in 2008, if I remember. Yeah, there's my. All right. But the flood not only it got them some federal dollars, but the federal dollars came with a hitch. They wouldn't let you rebuild here. FEMA basically says, we'll give you money to rebuild, but we're not going to let you rebuild here. So there's large areas of kind of downtown and just south of downtown Cedar Rapids where they can't do anything with the land. They won't let them rebuild because the 100-year flood is probably going to come back in 4 or 5 years. And so if your house is still standing, if it's still standing, you can stay there. So you've got pockets of houses, and then so what they're doing there's a religious organization there called Matthew 25, and they are gardening on a still pretty small scale, but the city is supporting it. They're trying to build a kind of a food economy around downtown Cedar Rapids. They've got a very nice indoor farmers market for food emporium that's open year round. So there really was a lot. And this was just a picture that reminded me that this man was from Liberia. Now this was just before the whole Ebola crisis. But fascinating man, and he followed us around to Chicago, Detroit, not to Detroit, but Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison, and then Cedar Rapids. He followed us. And we realized in talking to him and some of the materials that he shared that there are identical problems going on around the world. You know, in Liberia, which is a much poorer country than the United States, but he showed me the photos of what they're doing and their urban agriculture, and it was like Detroit, and it was like Chicago, and it was like Milwaukee. So I think there's an opportunity for a lot of international work because the same problems we're facing here, they're facing in the rest of the world. In terms of getting food into these giant cities where there's an awful lot of poverty. Boston, I didn't make it to Boston as part of this trip, but I did get remarried in 2009, and we went on our honeymoon to Boston, so this was July 3rd, but members of my team went there, and there's a project, an organization we worked with, so I don't have many photos from Boston. And surprisingly, I don't have very many photos from Madison. I have not done any of my work in Madison, with one exception, and that's working with the People program. I don't know if you've ever heard of the People program. It's all caps People. It's one of the best programs ever invented at UW-Madison. Basically, it targets minority and low-income youth in Milwaukee, Madison, Kenosha, Racine, and the tribes. And if you get accepted, and it's very competitive, you come to Madison for 3 weeks, for 3 summers in a row in high school, and if you make it through that and you get accepted at UW-Madison, you get a tuition-free 4-year ride at UW-Madison. In a way, it's smart for UW-Madison because they want to be more diverse. Kids who come there, they want somewhat of a diverse experience, you know. And yet Madison was not attracting these kids. Well, they found this program that really just gets the cream of the crop of a lot of the kids from these 4 cities and from the tribes. And so we introduced a program to really just teach food systems to these kids for 3 summers. And it's blossomed to the point where this year we've got 3 interns. I have 3, they'll be seniors. I have 3 seniors coming to my office every day for 6 weeks. I'm in charge of them. I have to keep them busy, and we've come up with a big project for them. And they're great, really amazing kids. And I've hired 4 of them over the years. That, you know, once they get into Madison, I've hired 4 of them, and they've been absolutely fantastic, amazing, some of the best workers I've ever had. Very diverse. The three that are working with me this summer is a Muslim woman from Waukesha, African-American woman from Milwaukee, and a kid from Menominee tribe. It's just kind of fascinating group of kids. And Madison's, you know, Madison has been at the heart of the local, buy local, local food movement for the whole 20 years I've been here. It really is. That is one place I feel like is a leader in the country. And this is in a grocery store, Cops. I don't know if you have Cops up here, or what's the other brand they have? Stop and Go or Shop and Go. Can't remember. But Cops has gotten behind this. That's Roundy's is their national chain down in, or their headquarters down in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, like I said, I've been there a lot. We had all the cities when we brought them in Milwaukee 3 years ago draw their city, draw their food system. And it's an exercise I would encourage you to do here. I'd have to ask someone on our team to remind us how we kind of got this started. But basically, we asked them to take 1 sheet of paper and draw their food system. And Milwaukee got carried away, and they required 6 pages. But there is a lot going on in Milwaukee, and they really did need it. One thing that was interesting, and afterwards it was done, and I realized they hadn't even put growing power on this map. Growing power is not even on this map of 6 pages. And part of that's because they're somewhat disconnected from what's going on in Milwaukee. They're a national organization now. They're the big elephant in the room. And it's a little less true now than it was 3 years ago, but at that time, people just didn't, I don't even think it occurred to people to put growing power down. They're so active in their own much smaller organizations. But there's 15 organizations in Milwaukee doing really interesting work, including growing power. They have a food council. I don't know if you have anything like a food council up here, but the one in Milwaukee is probably, no one is probably in the country has a better food council than Milwaukee's. Los Angeles is very, very interesting and very good, but this is really quite amazing. And if you'll notice, most of the people are women, and this is one thing I've been finding is that in this work, of food system work, there's definitely a predominance of women who are working in this, trying to change this food system more than men. And it's largely white. But in Milwaukee, there is certainly more diversity in people who are actually working on these issues. The south side of Milwaukee, if you don't know, is the Latino community. Milwaukee, Detroit, and Chicago all claim, and I've literally heard this in all 3 cities, to be the most segregated city in America. They all claim that. And they're probably tied. But in Milwaukee, the entire Latino population, not the entire, but most Latinos are in 2 zip codes on the south side. And we had a great project where we worked with them we worked with 2 grocers, 2 locally owned grocers, to get really not just fruits and vegetables, because they have a lot of fruits and vegetables in the Latino community in Milwaukee. Their grocery stores they have vegetables coming out their ears. A lot of it you wouldn't recognize. But they didn't have other things. You went to the middle aisles, and it was just horrible choices. So we worked with them to get these grains and seeds. And this wasn't things we wanted, but members of the community says, we want these same things in our store that I can get at the co-op if I drive 10 miles north. We want them in our community. And all we did was ask. We asked the grocer, and they said, yeah, let's do it. So it was as simple as asking. And getting behind them and promising we'd help promote the products once they were in the stores. Here's an extension colleague. She's the Master Gardener program leader, I think, for Milwaukee County. And in this case, this guy here is an absolutely fascinating teacher in Milwaukee. He's this biology teacher at a high school, Morse Marshall, and this is one of his former students. And they were trying to get a garden going in the little courtyard in between. This is Hunger Task Force, which is based in Milwaukee, and really it feeds pantries. It gets food to the pantries. And one year, the county farm, the county prison had a farm. They didn't want it anymore. In the middle of the season, they literally says, we don't want this anymore. And Hunger Task Force says, well, we'll take it. And they went out there and somehow figured out how to harvest. I took these specialists, Jed again, Jed made it into my presentation twice. Took it there. This was the weediest farm I'd ever seen in my entire life. This is worse than my garden has ever been. This was their second year. And they kind of like Will Allen, they just dove in. They just dove in 100%. They tried to grow, I think, 100 acres or something, or 80 acres. And they had never farmed before. And it was amazingly bad. But the next year, they took these guys' advice, they cut it back to maybe 25 acres, and now it's thriving. Now it's a really well-run farm, and they are feeding a lot of people in Milwaukee. So I also say in Cedar Rapids, one of my favorite examples was churches. A lot of churches were giving land to this nonprofit and saying, take our land, grow on it. So she's running around with small tractor and growing on church land, and it's something that churches can do. And I think some of their congregations are helping with some of the harvest. Really quickly, I'm just going to go through a bunch of signs, because that was just pictures from the cities, and these are just all mixed up. But in cities, they're trying to grow food on roofs. They have a lot of roofs in cities, and mostly they just capture sunlight and don't do anything with it, and here in water. But here they're trying to grow on roofs. A lot of different roofs, some crazy systems that aren't going to, a lot of innovation, a lot of experimentation, some of which will go nowhere. I did not see as much innovation in products and new products as I was hoping to find. Cities should be, places where entrepreneurs and creativity should be abound. And also, this guy over in Friesland is, an innovator, I think, in Wisconsin. Growing Power's got a lot of innovative products. It doesn't do any processing. This is a more traditional okra, more traditional Southern and African American food that you don't usually see grown here, but it grows here just fine. Peanuts grow here, I'm told. And there's a farmer at a garden in Milwaukee who's growing peanuts, and he's 85 years old and has been growing peanuts in Milwaukee for 40 years. Compost is a big, big issue. If you get Will up here, he'll probably talk for 20 minutes about compost. If you don't stop him, he'll just go on and on and on about compost and worms. And this is a big pile. It's kind of making it look bigger than it is, but a big pile in Chicago. And every time I drive to Chicago now, I think, my God, how much food waste is generated every year in this city? I mean, just think in your own household or in your own small town, and just think how much is happening in this city every year, just wasted. And if we could capture that waste and somehow get it turning it into soil, we could basically reclaim a lot of the land that's just been destroyed. These soils in urban areas are just, mostly you can't grow in it. It's contaminated with heavy metals. But if you can pile, and this is what Will does, if you can pile good soil, good compost on top of it, you basically reclaim it. It's not a cheap process. So small scale, Will uses compost on the side of his greenhouse to warm it. He doesn't really heat his greenhouses in the winter, I don't think at all. So he piles 4 or 5 feet of compost up on both edges of the greenhouse, of the hoop houses, to keep them warm, the heat that's generated from the compost. He is definitely an innovator. Amazing composting system, not amazing, but just they're scaled it up. Someone got some grant money and they scaled up composting to a municipal level in Cedar Rapids. You can't tell from that picture, but I got a YouTube video if you want to see it. Some animals. This is a goat on Will's farm. This is a horse in Detroit. They have to, I don't know where they put it in the winter, but in the summer, this is a school that is targeted to pregnant girls and young mothers, you know, at the high school age. So every girl that goes to this school is a mother or soon to be. And they have their whole playground. They had a gigantic concrete playground, and they just covered the whole thing in soil. And they're growing food, and the horses run wild. So they're giving them, you know, some kind of different experience. This chicken became, I think it's a chicken, not a rooster, but it became our kind of mascot for our project. It's on all of our website and everything. These are, this is another Will Allen innovation. He doesn't think up things from scratch. He keeps his eye out for who's doing something. He says, I want to try that. So this is a case of black soldier flies. They produce a larvae that he is thinking, and there's thought that it can be used as a cheap food source for his aquaponic system. There's two things that make aquaponics unprofitable. One is, in a northern climate, paying for light and heat, you know, in the winter. And the other is the feed for the fish. And this is thought that maybe these soldier flies. So he's got he's got a hoop house. There's just full of these flies, and they're producing larvae. And this is him or maybe one of his staff members showing me these larvae. I don't know. I haven't been back to ask him how that was working out. Bees are a kind of animal, but and there's lots of interest in chickens and whatnot in cities. Technology, I would have to say that the technology I saw in these urban areas was not high tech for the most part. You know, there's technology. I think they used some sort of tractor in this initially, but labor. I saw 2 tractors in 5 years in these cities. One of them that really was out in the rural area, and this was in Chicago. Here's California. This is growing on the side of a building. You can buy that thing off the web somewhere. Growing power, again, doing some interesting things, trying to capture water runoff and make the most of the water that there is. This aquaponic system, one of its advantages is it reuses water. So there's very little, you don't add much water to the system. Basically, the water reflows over and over, and feeds the fish, comes up, fertilizes the plants. And where the money, if there's any money to be made at all in aquaponic system, it's from the greens and lettuces and whatnot that you can sell to restaurants for a really good price. That's about the most technology I saw. Maybe a little bit better systems. I think the aquaponics is coming along. There's definitely some big money being invested in it. Whether they'll lose, I don't know. Win or lose, I don't know. A lot of learning going on. It's definitely a time period when there wasn't an urban agriculture, except maybe centuries ago. But so they're figuring it out. And this is at a school. This is growing power. There's definitely a lot of youth interested in this. This is the current president of UW System. I took him to Growing Power. This is the dean of the College of Agriculture. I took her to Growing Power. This is that teacher I mentioned earlier. He's got aquaponic systems in his classrooms. And if you want to, I could tell you someone to bring up here to Wapaka if you have an interest in introducing small-scale kind of learning aquaponic systems into your schools, middle school or high school. These are some kids in Chicago. These are some of the kids I've gotten to work with. On the last day of the class, we have the kids make a pizza. And they try, they get to make whatever they want. We set them up in a nice kitchen, and they, but they've learned over the few weeks, where does their cheese come from? Where does their, vegetables come from? Where does their animals, the meat products come from? And some experiments, and we try to introduce science into all this. A lot of art, I haven't really talked much about it, but it's kind of threaded through everything the past year is a huge amount of talk and concern and conflict and struggle over dealing with racism. I haven't even mentioned it, but it's a huge part of what these cities are dealing with. And when you work with them, they expect you to deal with it. And they put you through it, And it's definitely been some of the hardest parts of my job the past few years. Is just that misunderstanding, that whole cultural gap between white and black culture, especially. In Latino neighborhoods, it's more of a language barrier. But in terms of going into the African American neighborhoods, there is a very serious, gigantic gap between our cultures, and it's distrust. This is a sign in Cedar Rapids. And just some of the amazing people, I'm just going to end with people. The people who I've met in these past 5 years, you just see in their eyes their excitement for what they're doing. She's in Chicago. 2 amazing women. This is a school teacher in Milwaukee, in a Catholic school, who I think she works at this grocery store for pure fun. I'm sure they pay her, but she just loves working in this grocery store. And this is an amazing woman, Tatiana, on the right. This is that carrot meeting. We call it the Carrot Summit, kind of facetiously, but this was where he brought. There's a couple of the farmer Wilford from 2 Rivers over there and his wife. Basically a team. The president or the CEO of Cisco is there, and This is on that south side group that pulled together that grocery thing. There's two grocery owners. They'd never met, or at least they'd never been in a room together. They're probably arch rivals, but for this project, they sat right next to each other, and we worked with them. This is I didn't talk about it, but in LA, the organization that's most like Growing Power is called Homeboy Industries. If you want to Google something really fascinating, it's Homeboy Industries. It's started by a priest. And it's got food in it. They definitely work with food. They have restaurants and they're employing people. But basically, it's trying to give gang kids, gang youth, and adults a way out. And one of the biggest things they do is removing tattoos. One of their biggest services they provide is tattoo removal. Because if you've got some certain markings on your skin, it can be kind of a death sentence if you walk into the wrong neighborhood. And it also doesn't help with employment prospects. So amazing people. This man here died a few years back, but was kind of a founder, an academic founder of the study of urban agriculture, Jerry Kaufman. This is Martin Bailke, my co-manager in the project. Malik Yakini, amazing man, kind of a Will Allen of Detroit. This is Will's daughter on the right. This is Venus Williams, not the tennis player, but Milwaukee's Venus Williams on the left of Erica. And this is my last picture. I think I don't even know these folks' names. I didn't get their consent to use this photo, but they obviously let me take it. And they're selling corn. They make corn and roast corn and sell it at really a great farmer's market, Fondy Market, an 80-some-year-old market in just the near north side of Milwaukee. I think that's it, except to say that our way of trying to keep this work going, and Steve Ventura is in the thick of it, and I'm in the thick of it, is to try to create an Institute for Urban Agri-Nutrition in Milwaukee, building it around Will Allen's fame and his connections in the corporate and governmental circles. But basically, we've pulled all these are there's 7 university organizations, the city of Milwaukee. We got the top dogs in all 10 of these to sign a memo of understanding. The mayor of Milwaukee, the presidents and chancellors of all these universities have all signed a memo of understanding to try to create this Institute for Urban Agri-Nutrition. And we're about 3 years. We've been meeting every 2 weeks for 3 years, if you can imagine. It's academia. So I think that's it. I hope that was interesting, and I don't know if there's a whole lot of time. I went way past my buzzer, so I don't know if there's a lot of time for questions, but I didn't.